Alright, welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at what classes and object-oriented programming is. So, the thing about classes is that if you've never done it before, it is sort of a completely different way to code. It's a different way of thinking about programming, because up until now, if you've never done classes, what you would have thought about as you would have thought of code as functions and procedures, right? Now that's just one way of thinking about coding, because that is what is known as a paradigm in computer science language. A paradigm is like a way of thinking about how stuff should be represented in code. You have a functional procedural paradigm, which is the one you've probably learned about before, but then this one is an object-oriented paradigm. So classes, essentially what classes they are blueprints for creating what are known as objects, hence object-oriented. So a class will contain everything you need. Once you provide it with parameters, it will provide everything you need to create an object, which is a code representation of some sort of real life entity usually. Okay, so with an object, what you are doing is you're essentially what's known as you're abstracting a real life scenario. So abstraction is a concept in computer science where you have a real life problem, and what you're doing is you're removing what are unnecessary details to make the program easier to solve and easier to represent in code. And how you abstracting here is, let's say you take a person, for example. A person can be represented in code using a class and using an object. You're not going to sort of think about everything to do with that person. You might not, code in the representation of their body or their different limbs and stuff like that. But you might code in certain things that the person does. For example, speaking, thinking, saying stuff. All those kind of things you might represent in code, but you're not representing everything. And that in itself makes it easier to code and easier to represent. So that's kind of a reason why you use classes. And I suppose when you're making an application and you have repeatable things you could do, in a functional paradigm, you would probably repeat a procedure, right? You would repeat a function just by calling it. But in a class, let's say you have an object which has you're creating lots of similar objects. One way of doing it in a functional paradigm would be to store all the values, all the values to do with that object, to do with that entity. You would store them in some sort of data structure, right? You would store it maybe in a dictionary under some sort of key, right? That's how you would store all the values to do with that entity. But in a class, you can store those values as what is known as attributes. And with those attributes, you can create methods to act on those attributes. Methods are essentially just functions and procedures, the same way you would do before, but they are tied into specific things or specific features to do with that object. Now, at the start of a class, once you've defined it, you have to create what is known as a constructor method. So a constructor is the method which will be run immediately once you initiate the class, or what's known as instantiate the class. Once you instantiate your class, the first method that will automatically be run is the constructor. And what the constructor's job is to take in the parameters that you might pass in when creating the object and use those parameters to assign them to attributes in the object. Alright, now let's take a look at how we can do classes in Python now. We've looked at the features of classes. Now let's take a look at how we actually set them up in Python. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a really simple example. So we're going to create a class for a dog. So we're going to start off by defining our class, of course. The first thing you do, you type the word class. This is a keyword, class. You see it's gone blue here. and we write the name of our class. And the way you write names of classes in Python, you write them usually with a capital letter to start with, like this. So here's our class dog. Now you don't need to put brackets here. It's not like a function definition, actually. You don't need to put brackets here because brackets are used for something that's known as inheritance. I'll go into that in the next video. But when you're not inheriting any other class, you just put a colon, just like this. The next thing you need to do is you need to set up your constructor method. The way we write constructor methods in Python is we write it like this. We write it using the name init, but not just like init like this, but you have to do a double underscore, or it's a dunder method. So double underscore init, double underscore. Then the first variable in any method in a class, a method being of course a function or procedure in a class, the first variable, the first parameter is always what's known as your self variable. This self variable represents the instance of the class itself. So imagine I have some sort of dog, right? Some sort of dog instance. This self variable basically allows methods inside the class to access the different methods and attributes. Okay, so you'll see how it's used in a bit. The first variable always has to be self. Okay, then in this init function, this is the function that's going to take in, it's going to be run as soon as you instantiate the object. As soon as we create that object, this is the first method that's going to be run, right? So in this method, you have to write all of the parameters that you want to write to create your object. Okay, so init, if you're wondering, init stands for initiate. Okay, so for our dog object, we would want to probably add a name and maybe a breed, for example. So here I'll write name and breed. And so when we create our dog object, these are the two variables which we're going to have to pass in. Okay. So in this now, we have our self variable, right? So if you hover over this, so this is representing the dog itself, the dog object. Now we're going to take in these two values here, name and breed. But now we need to use these values that are passed in. They're passed in as local variables, right? We're going to turn these local variables into class variables. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to assign them to the class. And when you assign variables to the class, they become attributes. Okay? So let's say we want our dog to have a name. So the value that's been passed in is name, but the attribute is going to be self.name. Now this can be self.whatever you want. It's the same thing as a normal variable. We're going to call it self.name. And self.name, which is the attribute, is going to take in the value of name, which has been passed in. Same thing for the breed. We're going to make self.breed equals breed. Okay. And I'm going to add one more attribute as well, which I'm going to call favorite food. Okay, so we're going to do self.favFood, and for this I'm going to introduce a little bit of randomness. Okay, so I'm going to really quick import the random module, and we're going to do random.choice. Okay, here we're going to randomly choose between either, we're going to say beef, pork, or we can have a vegan dog, or have them eat vegetables. Okay. So when this class is instantiated, when we create this dog object, it's going to randomly pick a favorite food. Okay. So now this is the method that is run when the class is instantiated. So let's say as soon as it's instantiated, it prints us out a message. We're going to say, hello, Oh, no, actually, let's not do hello. This is the dog, right? Let's say woof. Woof. I'm, and then we'll put his name. I'm going to use an F string. So we go here. I'm self.name a, then we'll put his breed, self.breed. Okay. Let's give it a try then. Let's create our first object. So this is all that you need. You only need one method if you really want, and that's the constructor. Once you've made the constructor, it's up to you how many more methods you want. So let's run it then. We're going to create our object. We're going to call it my dog, and we'll do dog. So it needs a name. As you can see, these are the two attributes, the two parameters that we need to pass in. So let's put Jimmy as his name, and we'll give him breed a Labrador. Alright, so when we run this, it will automatically run this constructor. Let's give it a try. Woof, I'm Jimmy, a Labrador. Perfect. Okay. Okay, let's give it a bit more complexity now. So what we're going to do is let's create a second method that prints out his favorite food, right? Because we created this, and this is what we call right now, this method, this attribute rather, this is a public attribute. Now what that means is this attribute can be accessed outside of the class. So this is our class definition, right? All of this here, if I close this up, this is the class definition. Okay, now I've created my dog object here, right? And because this is a public attribute, this means that I can access this attribute outside of the class. Okay, so let's say if I wanted to, I could go here, print my dog dot fav food. Now this is how you access attributes, by the way. You can access attributes and methods in the exact same way. You just do the same way we did self dot here. We just do object, which is our my dog, dot, and then the method or the attribute. Okay, so because this is a public attribute, we should be able to print this out. Here you go. So it prints the same thing, and it prints out his favorite food, which is this method, this attribute right here. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to make it so that this attribute becomes a private attribute. Now, if you see, the issue with this is that, imagine this was a sensitive piece of information, right? When this class was being created, if this was a sensitive piece of information, it would be able to easily be accessed outside of the class. Okay, so I'm just going to show you right now what could possibly happen. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to print out his favorite food right here. Okay, so say my favorite food is, and then we'll do the same F string as well. We'll do self dot food and put F here. Okay, so he's going to print out the favorite food. Okay, so this is my favorite food is vegetables. Okay, now because this is a public attribute, what I can do here is I can actually change the value of this attribute. Let me give it a try now. We'll do my dog dot fav food, and then just like that I can actually change this value. Let's say chips or something like that. Just like that, you can change the value of this attribute, and they shouldn't be able to do that, right? Because if all of these are public, they can accidentally be accessed and accidentally be changed, which is bad. Now let's see if it prints it again. Now if I say print my dog dot fav food, which is that attribute right there, which is saved in the class, see what happens. So initially it says my favorite food is beef, but then I've changed it like that, and now it says chips, which is not what we want, right? So what we're going to do now is we are going to make this fav food, we're going to make this a private attribute. Okay, that means it can only be accessed in the class itself and through methods in the class. Now what that means is you can call a method which will give you the attribute. You can call a method that will print it out, but you can't directly access it just like this. So here's what we're going to do. The way you designate a private attribute is you put a double underscore here, just like this. Only at the start, right? You don't have to do it, only at the start. You don't have to do it like this. You only put two double underscores, or a double underscore. You put double underscore here at the start, and that designates it to be a private attribute, okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to remove this, and what we'll do is we're going to write a method called getFavoriteFood. Now here's the thing, with private attributes, because we can't directly access them outside of the class, we need to create what are known as getters and setters, or get methods and set methods. That will allow you to get the value of whatever the attribute is, and also then set what that attribute is, because that can all be done within the class methods. Okay? So we're going to create this method. As long as we pass in the self, then we can do print, or no, we'll do as a get method, we're going to do it as a return, okay? So we'll do return self dot, and then the same thing, favfood. There we go. Now, over here I can write print my, actually no, I'm not going to do that. We've got a getter here, and we can also set that if we want. And then we could ask the user for the new value. In fact, because it's this is a method, right? We can also get it to pass in what the value is. So new favfood. And then the good thing about having a setter method or set method is that you can now introduce some sort of criteria, some sort of validation before you set the new value. So let's say that the user enters chips like I did here, right? We can say if new favfood equals chips, we can do print this is not a suitable food. And that way we can't just automatically change it without any validation. We've introduced some here, and that means that if it's some value that is not required or not good, then it won't be changed. Else, we're going to do self.favfood equals new favfood. And now because we're inside a class method here we can change this value. Alright, let's give it a try now. So obviously if I try this here, just to demonstrate, I realized I didn't actually show this before, but if I try and do the exact same thing, doing the object dot double underscore favorite food, you'll see it won't actually be able to be accessed. So let's give it a try now. I'm going to remove that. We'll put here the exact same variable name, as you can see. Let's try printing it. Here, as you can see, Python does not know that this is a variable that belongs to this class because it's a private attribute. Okay? See, it says it has no attribute. Well, we know it actually does have an attribute because we've declared it here. Python can't access it from outside of the class, meaning it's private. Okay? So now let's try setting it to chips, see if our validation works. We're going to do my dog dot set favorite food, and we're going to set it as chips, see if it works. There we go. As you can see, it says this is not a suitable food. Perfect. Alright guys, that is going to be it for this small introduction to classes. If you've enjoyed it, if you found it useful, please do leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. This is going to be the first of 2 videos on class I'm going to make. The second video will be on more advanced features of classes, so stick around for that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.